Gentlemen, welcome to the Order of Man podcast. This is the Ask Me Anything episode. My name is Kip Sorensen. I'm typically the co-host of this episode with Mr. Mickler. Unfortunately, Ryan's traveling today, and so I am running solo. We're going to field questions from the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. You can learn more about the Iron Council by going to orderofman.com/Iron Council. And then if we have enough time, I may field a few questions from our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/group/Order of Man. We're going to get right into this. No banter with myself. Our first question, Marcus Segura, as it pertains to this month's topic within the Iron Council, what transitions have you faced in your personal leadership or failures that could be seen as defining moments? And as you can guess, our monthly topic within the IC is around defining moments. He has a secondary question, and don't worry, I'll address both. He says, in the same regard, in leadership, you have choices coming into transition. How do you use your past experiences to create defining moments? So first, what transitions have you faced in your personal leadership or failures that could be seen as defining moments? This is a little bit of a tricky question for me personally, Marcus, because it's kind of like one of those things like trauma, where we utilize that word and it means something drastically different to individuals. Typically, when I hear defining moments or what I think are defining moments, there's probably a handful of those throughout our entire life. And a defining moment is obviously a moment in time by which there was transformation, right, around how we show up or how we are being in the world. And to be frank, I think the majority of those defining moments were made when we were younger. And although they served us in particular ways, as adults and as we become more aware of the unconscious, we might determine that those defining moments no longer serve us. And so I know this isn't in the root of your question, but I think we need to be careful in the assumption that all defining moments at all times in our life are always beneficial. Now, in the spirit of your question, faced personal leadership, defining moment for me, I would actually go back to be frank, a defining moment that I've had roughly about 4 or 5 years ago. We have a split home. I have 2 boys from a previous marriage. My wife has a boy from a previous marriage, and then we have kids together. And roughly about 4 or 5 years ago, we were really struggling with one of those boys. He was, in my opinion, not making the best decisions for himself. He was putting himself in difficult circumstances that frankly was going to affect his future. And unfortunately, for my wife and I, we allowed it to affect our relationship with him, how we saw him. And I realized, and I used to think this, and this was kind of that defining moment. I used to feel like, hey, you need to get your actions in line. You need to show up in a way that I feel you should, and stop doing all the things I feel like you shouldn't be doing. And then we can have a better relationship. Then we can foster a positive relationship and we can progress. But it was based upon the pretense that he needed to do that part first. And I would argue that a lot of us do this. I've done this numerous times in my life where I felt like maybe my marriage could be better, but it was based upon my wife needing to change first. If she did these things, then I would. And maybe said another way, if I have this, then I will do X, and then I will be happy, or I'll be content. So it was rooted in having, then doing, then being. Now, if you evaluate that, what is that based upon? a victim mindset. It's outside of my realm of control. And not only that, but think of that from my teenage son's perspective. Oh, son, only if you change your behavior, if you change how you are showing up in the world, then we will have a relationship with you. Then, maybe said another way, then we will love you. Then we will see your challenges. Then we will have quote unquote unconditional love. Horrible. If you really think about the repercussions of that way of showing up in the world, horrible approach. And so that was a major shift for me, that I realized that I needed to change my mindset about him, that I needed to see him as whole and complete. Now, I could see him as whole and complete and his divine self and his potential, and separate that from his actions. I don't need to agree with what he was doing, but I needed to not withhold my love, affection, and willingness to have a relationship with him, and having that predicated on the actions that he took. Said another way, I needed to be a certain way, take the actions of being a great father, and then I was going to have the relationship with him that I wanted. So I needed to be, do, and then have that type of relationship with him, not have, do, and then be. So I needed to be happy, love him, do my job as a father, agnostic of those things, and take the necessary actions aligned with that. And then only then would I have the ability to have the type of relationship I should have with my son. You can imagine I could take that same exact framework and apply it to how I show up in my marriage, how I show up in relationships at work, with friends, and et cetera, right? Such a profound statement. We need to focus on our mindsets and how we are being in the world, and not be sitting back waiting for all these things I need to have first for me then to take action in regards to how I show up. Marcus's second question: in leadership, you have the choice of coming into transition. How do you use your past experiences to create defining moments? So let's talk about what creates a defining moment. I think a defining moment is a moment of transformation or major shift, right? Where we see the world one way, and maybe said like Stephen Covey used to use a paradigm shift. We see the world one way, and now our paradigm is different. We see the world differently, and we show up differently, right? In that defining moment. So how do we take something of the past and use that in a positive way to show up more powerfully today? And I think ultimately that is getting present in the moment and getting present of the impact of that past experience. I think we naturally downplay our impact in the world. We downplay the importance of things. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, it requires a death of a loved one. It requires your loved one wanting to leave you and no longer want to be with you for us to be confronted with the impact that we have in our relationships and how much of that impact is within our realm of responsibility and ownership. I think it's default behavior for us to show up as victims in this world because it's an easy pass, right? Well, it's this way because of this and because of that, and I'm being acted upon. And it takes a lot of responsibility to take ownership. And so I think we avoid it. But I think the defining moments are when we realize our impact in the circumstance, in the situation, and we get really present to the idea that like my life is the way it is because I created it this way. I've created this. So anybody listening that's like, you're down and out, right? Your marriage isn't going well, work's not going well, or your relationship with your boss isn't well, or your relationship with your employees isn't well, or anything, you pick it. Wherever you have an upset, we need to get present to the idea that it is what you have created. Now, that's a tough pill to swallow. However, It is also empowering, because if it means that if I created this, then I can actually do something about it. And we can take ownership and pivot and adjust. But it's only in ownership where there's an opportunity of learning and development. There's no growth in being a victim. Daniel Prine, what are some methods that you as men, that we as men can utilize when trying to avoid anger in situations where anger is not the best emotion to bring to the table? So what are some methods, right? Where we probably typically get angry and we shouldn't, or it doesn't serve us. One, I don't know, this is interesting. In fact, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, DMs or whatever, I'm actually interested on your guys' feedback of when anger is the right emotion to bring to the table. I don't know if it is. I think about jujitsu, right? If I'm in a physical conflict with someone, I'll be frank, man. If I come to the table or I come to the mats and I'm angry, it doesn't necessarily always serve me. I get overly aggressive. I put myself in negative circumstances, and then I get caught more, I think. Interesting. I'm interested if anger, in what circumstances you guys think that anger might actually serve us. Put that in the comments below if you're listening to this on Facebook or on YouTube. With that said, how do we avoid this? First off, let's get clear. There is usually a big difference between what generates anger versus the circumstance or the situation. There is what occurred, which is the situation, and then there is the interpretation of the situation. Anger is usually derived from the interpretation, not actually from the situation itself. It's what the situation means. And most importantly, what it means about me. And so us getting present to that is the first step of this process. We got to get really clear that our perceptions of the world, our perceptions of situations is not truth. It's your perception, your creation of the situation. You need to own the meaning that we put around situations. Now, based upon that concept, I believe that most upsets that we experience where we might bring anger to the table is always one of three things. Number one, you're out of integrity. Number two, you have unmet expectations. Or number three, you're not fully expressed. Let me give you an example of each. If you're out of integrity, I come to work. I know what I should be doing. And let me pause. Let me reset what is integrity. Integrity is far more than just doing what you know you should do when people aren't looking. That's the standard blue belt version of integrity. The black belt interpretation of integrity is that, as well as doing things the way they were meant to be done. In life, we can check boxes really easily and say, I did it, but we know in our guts and in our hearts that we may have not done it the way it was meant to be done. Integrity is more about self-betrayal with your own interpretation of what you should have done more than anything else. Self-betrayal in, I know the quality of the work I should have done here, and I cut corners. I'm out of integrity. Well, I did the things and Bob's happy, so I'm not out of integrity. No, you might be out of integrity because you didn't do it the way that you know you should have done it. It's a form of self-betrayal. Now, ironically enough with this, why does this generate upset? Why would I be upset in circumstances? Because we have to justify the lack of integrity. And that justification is usually a finger pointing towards someone else. Let me give you an example. I may have shared it on the podcast before, but I'll do it again. It is what it is. I have a little boy, my baby boy, Koa, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when he's a toddler. I'm in bed. I'm sleeping. Mom sleeps great through the night. I don't necessarily. He starts crying. I wake up. She doesn't wake up. And my mind and my heart says, Kip, you should get out of the bed and take care of the baby. I am now confronted with a choice. I stay in bed, which requires justification, form of self-betrayal, or I get out of the bed and do what I know I should do. Now, you guys may not relate. Same thing. Alarm goes off to go to the gym, 5:30 a.m. You have a choice. Get out of bed and go to the gym. Or if you choose to stay in that bed, what do you have to do? You have to excuse it because it goes against the fabric of your being. So you need to lie to yourself. You have to justify it. Well, it was a late night, and oh, I'm kind of sore. Oh, it's better that I get good rest than have a good workout. Look, we drum up the story to justify the action. In this example of the baby, I justify my story of why not getting up. Why am I not getting up? Oh, because I work so hard. Poor me. It's her that can take a nap during the day. I can't take naps during the day, but she can. And I start creating a perception around my wife to justify my lack of action. We might even generate forms of victimhood. And it is a form of victimhood, by the way, a form of victimhood, and make someone out to be our persecutor to justify our lack of action. And thus we're out of integrity. Upset number one, integrity. Number two, unmet expectations. I shouldn't have to deal with this. I have this expectation that I shouldn't have to do this type of training for my employees. They should know. So I shouldn't have to deal with it. And then we sit and we never complete the thought. And we sit with the unmet expectation of what we should or should not have to be dealing with. And we just fester in it. And we just fester and we fester and we fester because we're unwilling to let go of the expectation and deal in reality. A way I like to say this is we never complete the thought. And what's the thought that we need to complete? I shouldn't have to do this. And here's the complete thought. But you need to. So what are you going to do about it? And we take on ownership. And now we actively start taking action. But in this space of unmet expectations where we just hold on and we fester and I shouldn't and should not have to, we're not taking ownership in that circumstance. We're festering in our victimhood of, oh man, I shouldn't have to do this. And so we don't take action. And so we need to let go and deal in reality. We all have difficult circumstances. Our kids aren't perfect. Our wives aren't perfect. Our jobs aren't perfect. Your career isn't perfect. So once you accept that, say, yeah, but guess what? It is what it is. So what are you going to do about it? And when we take action, we get empowered. And that's how we address not being angry, because angry just sits there, right? And we fester and make everyone wrong for the circumstance that we shouldn't have to be dealing with. And the last, third upset example, not being fully expressed. My hardest, by the way, I struggle with this. Super, super difficult for me to do because I get in my own head and I justify and I explain why I shouldn't express how I feel, because I shouldn't feel this way anyway. And Kip, you're making a story. And so, just deal with your story and you don't have to express yourself. But the reality of it is when we're not fully expressed, it shows up in other ways. So when we're upset, we need to share the upset. Now, here's the rub. We got to be careful what we're sharing. So, wife does X, Y, Z. Remember, there's a difference between the circumstance and my interpretation. She does the circumstance or the situation. I add interpretation on top of it. I'm upset. If I don't communicate, I'll eventually stonewall. I'm holding it back. It'll show up in other ways. I'll withdraw love and affection, or the next time that happens again, I'm even more triggered, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to be expressed. We need to be fully expressed. Now, how do I do that? I don't say, hey, honey, you pissed me off. I don't communicate from a position of victimhood. I own my interpretation. Hey, when you did X, Y, Z, I know it doesn't logically make sense, but it felt like, or I interpreted it as this. And I want to let you know it made me upset. No ask. Now, you might have a request coming out of it, but I might just say, hey, when this happened, I interpreted this and this makes me upset. So I'm just dealing with that. And I want to let you know. What that does is allows her to understand me better. She gets what those triggers are about me, and she understands the circumstance and doesn't make a bunch of other assumptions about something else. And I get expressed. I get it off my chest a little bit. But be careful not to interpret your meaning as fact. Own the meaning that you created and share it, whether it logically makes sense or not, because it is something that you created that you're dealing with. Let them know what you're dealing with. So once again, Daniel, I would suggest upsets, the way we manage those is really by one of three things. We need to get in integrity. And if we're out of integrity, we need to restore our integrity. Number two, deal with unmet expectations by dealing in reality. Let go of the unmet expectation and deal with what is so. And third, be fully expressed. When we're upset, we need to address it and we need to communicate it. And we need to communicate it from a position of ownership, not from a position of victimhood. A little bit of a rant on that one. All right. Next question. Josh Patterson. My Ask Me Anything question is regarding the 4 quadrants, and I'll explain those in the Iron Council. He says they are all important, but is there one that you feel impact? One that, when executed extremely well, helps define yourself and how you attack the rest. Thank you in advance, Josh. So within the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood, learn more at orderofdemand.com/Iron Council. We talk about, we have what we call our battle plans. And think of our battle plans as our goal setting, if you want to use that term. And our battle plans are broken into 4 quadrants. And I have a battle planner here. You can get yours at store.orderofman.com. And the 4 quadrants are calibration, connection, condition, and contribution. Now, Josh, it's not that simple. Let me first say that all 4 are critical. I've been in the ICU long enough. I've ran battle teams long enough to know that when a guy doubles down on one of these and then lets one lax or doesn't address the balance of all 4, we have a problem. And eventually there will be a problem. So it's important that we maintain balance. Now, in the spirit of your question, Josh, which one is kind of a little bit more important? Here's the rub. If you're getting on the path, you've been off the path, life is chaotic, and you are struggling, the most important quadrant, in my opinion, is condition, because it's low-hanging fruit. Start going to the gym, get your health in line, and start taking care of your body. That gives you more energy. It gives you momentum. And as we know, when we do hard things, there's a mental element to that. And we build confidence. So there's confidence gaining momentum that comes with the condition quadrant. And so if I was having a conversation with someone and they're struggling in life, that's the first question I'd ask is, how you doing on your condition? I had a gentleman talk to me once about struggling with pornography. And he's, man, Kip, I'm struggling in this area and I keep lapsing or whatever. And I go, what are you doing to prepare your mind for delayed gratification? What things are you doing to have mental fortitude? Nothing. So can you even do like a hard workout, or do you cheat even on the workout? If you can't go through a hard workout and not cheat, you're going to cheat everywhere else in life. So that's why the workout's a low-hanging fruit. It creates some momentum for us around mental fortitude and all those other things. And so that's what my answer would be, Josh, for people just getting on the path. Now, for us that maybe are a little bit been on the path for a while, my answer is different. And my answer would be the calibration quadrant. You need to get right with yourself. We need to make the unconscious conscious. We need to have strong emotional intelligence. We need to be self-aware. Only through that can we not be a victim of the meaning that we constantly add to everything. So calibration, for those that's been on the path for a while, that's kind of the brown belt, black belt, I think, quadrant. White and blue belts, condition. All right, next question. Sylvester Quidkowski. Sorry, man. Hopefully that's close. One of my defining moments, I should say, or I would say moments, was continuously verbal and physical abuse by my father. Additionally, I did not have any positive male role models later in my life, and I did not actively seek them out. This is why I rejected masculinity any way, shape, or form. From an archetype perspective, I can see parts of that magician or lover in myself, but I have difficulties with the king or the warrior part. My question is, how can I embrace these missing parts? What strategies and tactics can I use to awaken the king and the warrior within me? For those not in the Iron Council, maybe said another way, how can I embrace more masculine ways of being when his past has obviously proven to him that anything masculine was a huge negative perception or associated, right? Physical, verbal abuse, no positive masculine role models in his life. How do you possibly embrace masculinity in such a circumstance? And I sound like a broken record here, but man, it's the root of this. We need to get present between the situation and the story we created. Did the verbal and physical abuse by your father and the lack of masculinity in your life, did that happen because they were masculine? In fact, I would even beat that up a little bit more. Did the continuous verbal and physical abuse from your father mean that he didn't love you? Or did you create that? People might be losing their minds a little bit here. Oh my gosh, Kip, you're justifying the fact that someone is abusive and that hardship is something that you need to deal with? Yeah, if you don't want to be a victim of it. If you want to make that horrible past a catalyst for you showing up powerfully as a man, the way you do that is through empathy and through understanding. I really, really believe that. There's a big difference between the physical abuse and the interpretation thereof. Own your interpretation. We have to say that physical and verbal abuse is okay. I'm not saying any of that, but there's power in owning your interpretation. Because often what we've done is we've lumped that meaning into one big basket, maybe for you in particular, that's what masculinity is. And until you unpackage that and say, no, actually, that's my creation. I created that interpretation that all masculine men are this particular way. It's only then will you then see the difference between what occurred versus what you've created. So we need to get present to the stories and the awareness around those stories. Now, with that said, the next step of that process is get present to the benefits. So I'd ask you, what are the benefits? Why do you think you need to embrace the king and the warrior part archetypes? Why? Because we read it in a book? Work through, if those things were present in your life, how they would have benefited you. And get present to that. And then the other part of it, I would say, if you're a father, get present to why your kids, your wife, and those that you love need that element of you. Why they need that in their lives. If you can't answer that question passionately, you're not connected to it, right? You need to get so present to that that it moves, touches, and inspires you into action. So there's no hack here other than working through this, whether it's your past, projecting into the future, the pros and cons, and the studying required of why this is so critical. And through that process, you're going to realize how critical it is that you're masculine for those that you love. And what's being left on the table if you're not. And if that doesn't move you to action, I don't know what will. Additional resources, The Boy Crisis, one of my favorite books of all time around this subject. Ryan's book, Sovereignty. Trust me, there's tons of books and content around the values of this. I would get present to it and do your necessary studying and self-awareness around how your past is being projected into your future. And let me actually say one thing around that too. Sylvester, if you don't mind me suggesting, who you are is up to you. You're not defined by your past. And I really believe that. Anybody that is locked into how they were raised and it's altered who they are and their relationships with people, it's good to understand how those things impacted you, but it doesn't define you. We have the ability to invent ourselves. I really do believe that. And so let go of the past and define who you need to be right now as a man and what kind of man best serves those that they love and provides a positive, lasting impact in the lives of all those around. Define that for yourself and then be it. And let go of past meanings, circumstances around how that has defined you as an individual. I feel like I'm gonna get a little foo-foo-y on the answers here, but hopefully that resonates with you. Okay, we're gonna hop over to Facebook. Bob Ross, what tactics do you use when you must make a decision for your family that not all members may be happy with? For example, moving to a new home, even after a lengthy explanation and attempting to provide clarity, I find myself feeling guilty that not all parties are pleased, although I believe this decision will benefit all involved in the long run. Thank you for your guidance and your perspective. All right, Bob. So this is a little tough. And I kind of want to project. So this might be a little bit applicable for more people. So everyone listening, right? This is ultimately, how do I get people on board that haven't been on board? Maybe that's from a work, maybe that's from a family perspective. Now, Bob, particularly your question from a family perspective, there's a big difference from the root in this is like all members. What do you mean all members, right? Like your spouse, because getting your spouse on board is a whole other decision than getting your kids on board. The reality of it is we don't need our kids on board. Now, it might be nice to, but ultimately in the end, you got to execute on what you feel is best for your kids and for those that you lead and serve. Spouse, on the other hand, if you were saying, hey, my spouse isn't on the same page and how do I get them on board? Or from a work perspective, I can't get my employees on board, then you need to work on getting them on board. That's the answer. Or if you can't communicate it in a way that they can get on board, one, we need to communicate better. We need to get more clear in our own minds so we can communicate better. Or perhaps, especially from a work perspective, maybe we shouldn't be doing it. If it is so hard for me in a leadership role to get people to see the value of it, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. Or maybe I need to get way more present of how it's going to serve and benefit them. And guess where the answer in that is? It's in asking them. It's understanding their circumstance and their position and where they're at. And maybe the answer is it doesn't serve them. It won't benefit them. So I think we need to do a little bit more work to get people on board and or question whether we should be doing the thing or not. Now, kids are a little bit different, right? But I would argue if this isn't a dichotomy. I think it's like, hey, how do I get people on board that aren't on board? You get them on board or you don't do it. So improve our communication, get more clear on how it benefits and relate it to what they need or how it will benefit them, because we may not be making that translation, right, of how it will serve them. And if we don't know how it will serve them, then we need to be talking with them to figure out what's best for them. Or we should be considering whether we made the right decision or not. I know that's a little in your face, Bob, but hopefully that gives you some food for thought. Ty Sherwood, what are some ways that you have overcome fear in the past and or some fears you are facing today? So how have we overcome fears of the past and or deal with fears you are facing today? By stopping the assumptions that who we are today is based upon moments from our past. This is rooted on the first part of your question, Ty. Have overcome fears of the past. How do you overcome fears of the past? It's in the past. It is what it is. Like, it's over. Let it go. We need to let go. Now, that past affects us sometimes. So be careful. Like, you know, I'm being fair. I'm trying to be fair here that, hey, well, Kip, that's great all you want. But like, regardless of how much I let go of the past and understand the interpretations I had of past experiences, when I go do X today, I still have anxiety around it, right? And I still need to address it. Well, get present to why do you have anxiety around it? Do you have anxiety and fear of the current circumstance from the mindset of that past experience, or is it real for you in the moment? Let me try this way. And we were talking about this earlier, defining moments, right? So the unfortunate part is sometimes when we have defining moments, and I mentioned this earlier, that defining moments sometimes don't serve us, right? They serve us in the moment, but they don't serve us in the future. A defining moment I have, and by the way, this is not truth. In fact, I don't even know if this is like legit. I just know this is my interpretation as a 5-year-old. Okay, so I'm going to share one of my first defining moments with you guys. I was 5 years old. It was my first day of kindergarten. My mom drove me up to the school and said, "Have a good time," and told me to get out of the car. That's it. And I wandered around the school. I had no idea where to go. I was scared. I didn't know anybody. I felt abandoned by my mom, the one person that should take care of me more than anyone else. And I was scared. I took that circumstance and I did what with it? I don't want to experience this ever again. So I'm not going to do what? Rely on people. I'm not going to rely on anybody out of fear of abandonment from them. Now, here's the funny part. I don't even know if that happened. My mom could have walked me into school. I have actually no idea, but I remember this like it was no day, like it was yesterday. It was a defining moment for me. I saw the world one way, and after that experience, I saw the world differently, and I decided I was going to show up differently in the world. Now, you don't think that 5-year-old way of thinking shows up as a 44-year-old? It certainly does. And that's why it's so critical that we understand the difference between what happened and our interpretation. Because now when I have feelings of abandonment, I can remember and go, oh my gosh, like I know where this is triggered from. And now I'm bringing that defining moment into my marriage with someone that is not going to abandon me whatsoever. And so I need to understand those interpretations. Does that make sense? So they don't define my present state of things. So your fear, overcoming fear of the past, may be from the mindset of a 10-year-old. So get present to the past and let go of the meaning. Now, I want to be really clear. It's still there. It doesn't go away. But the awareness of it allows you to act accordingly and not be driven by it. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. And I could probably say that much better. Now, with that said, let's say, Kip, there's no psychological defining moment in my past, and I struggle with fear that I'm facing today. It's all about the reps. How do you get over anything? How do you grow in any way? You give yourself reps. I have a fear of going to the gym and getting smashed by a bunch of jiu-jitsu guys. So what do I need to do? Go to the gym and get smashed by jiu-jitsu guys. That's how I get over it. And eventually, it doesn't bother me anymore to get smashed. How do I get over the fear of asking a girl out? You ask a girl out. How do I get over the fear of something? You do it. That's how we do it. There's not like this hack of like, hey, let me avoid the uncomfortable mindset that is associated. So then that way I'll take the necessary action. No, you take the action. And one maybe little hack that might be available to you is just be present. Of like, wait a second, is this a valid thing to be fearful about? No, it's not. That's kind of weird, but okay, whatever. I'm going to go anyway. And we have to work in the reps. It's not glamorous, but that's the answer. Brian Dubs Taylor, I'm curious how forgiveness works for some of the more mentally stable appearing folks. Example, I can say I forgive someone who screwed me over a long time ago, but if I see them or hear their name in my head, I may think F them, but I'm a Christian and I know this is wrong. So I guess I'm asking to hear someone's name or see them somewhere and not even briefly think some negative thought or even hope the best for them and pray they've changed for the better. So how do we get past that negative animosity? So this is good question. The answer is you have empathy and you understand them. One way that I've done this in the past is I think if I were them and I was raised the way they were raised in the same circumstances, I would have made the same decision. Thus, who am I? We are naive. And in fact, not only naive, it's a fundamental error in the space of psychology, a fundamental attribution error when we attribute someone's action to their character. It's not so simple. Often, the hardship, the suffering, the pain that we experience from other individuals is a byproduct of some other story and thing that they were doing. Most people intentionally did not try to screw you over. Now, were they being selfish? Were they not thoughtful? And all these other things? Sure. But the reality of it is most people walk around this world trying to look good, They're avoiding looking bad, and they're seeking the acceptance of other individuals. And there's collateral damage in that process. And most of the suffering that we experience is in the space of collateral damage. And it's unfortunate and it's horrible and it's sad or whatever. But the quicker that we can get to empathy and love for those individuals, that is when you're able to let go. And then you almost not just like feel like sorry for them, but you get it. And it's kind of just like, oh man, that's unfortunate. I feel for them. Now, I'm not saying you drop boundaries and put yourself in tough circumstances or your family circumstances. I don't say that, but you can actually have empathy and love for someone. And it's actually rooted in understanding them. Separate the story from the action. There is what happened to us, and then there is what we made it mean. Most of the suffering we experience in life is in the meaning and not what happened. And then you can look at what happened and have some empathy in the actions that they took once you remove the meaning that you created around it. And I know this works, Brian. I know this works. I've done this. I've had those people in my life that I could not stand, that I hated, people that I've hated. And I can honestly say that those people, I love them and I get it. And I feel sorry for them. I really do. And it makes me even more grateful for my life and my experiences, that I didn't have to deal with some of the things that they dealt with that got them in the circumstances that they're in. So have some empathy. And let's stop pretending that we are so quick to judge and assume everybody's reasons and stories. It's naive and it lacks intelligence and critical thinking. That's why most people judge, because it's the lazier thing to do. The difficult thing is to critically think. All right, gentlemen, that's all I have for today. As always, you can connect with Mr. Michler on X and Instagram at Ryan Michler. To learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. Enrollment is closed until January. However, if you want to get on that path of getting after it, you can join us on our Battle Ready program. That's orderofman.com/Battle Ready. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for banding with us. And until Friday, for Friday Field Notes, let's take action and become the men that we were meant to be.